Welcome to The Great Relearning. I am Dr. Rob Williams, the host of the Great Relearning podcast, sponsored by the Marion Institute, with special thanks to the three Baldwin brothers, Michael and Ian and Philip. Welcome. And our special guest today, all the way from Switzerland, is Jeremy Narby, who is the author of The Cosmic Serpent, DNA and the Origins of Knowledge. First published en français in 1995, and then en anglais in 1998. Am I getting that right, Jeremy?
It sounds right to me.
Welcome. Bienvenue.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Rob.
It's really, really good to have you here. Let's jump right in. For those who may not be familiar with your work, Jeremy, and your journey, let's start with that twofold path, if we might. Begin with telling us a bit about your work, and then we'll talk about what brought you into the Amazon.
Sure. I was interested in understanding why the world was the way it was. Why are there rich people? Why are there poor people? That kind of question. In the 1970s, I was a teenager. My father suggested I study history because I didn't know precisely what to study. So I did what my father suggested. And as I studied history, I realized that it wasn't what I was really looking for, even though it was interesting. I mean, the whole world is interesting. And a friend pointed me to anthropology, saying, if you want to understand differences of race, gender, and economic and class, you study anthropology. You can understand why there are these differences between people. And so I applied to Stanford. I got into Stanford. I started studying anthropology at Stanford. And yes, it was exactly what I was looking for. It was like I was passionately interested in how you can take a human society and study it and look at it and look at how it works. And, you know, this was already like, so in 1981, my professors were feminists, they were Marxists, intellectuals, they were critical of capitalism and critical of the patriarchy and so forth, lots of big concepts. And all the while, I was still sort of stuck on that teenage thing of rich and poor, or what they call third world development at that point. And so I went and saw one of my professors, Renato Rosaldo, and he said, you know, you should look into indigenous people. These are people who live in out-of-the-way places, Australia, the Amazon, the Arctic, on top of vast natural resources that they don't use in a way that the development experts, be they capitalist or communist, think is rational.
The development experts.
The development experts around the world say, yes, indigenous people are obstacles to progress. And if you want to understand inequalities of like north, south, first world, third world, call it what you want. You go to a place where there's that kind of project or happening, and go see what's going on in a place like the Amazon. So you have international development money, the World Bank, the Peruvian state or the Brazilian states plowing hundreds of millions of dollars. In those days, that was a lot of money, into cutting down the forest, taking territories away from indigenous people who were said to be either not there or not human, and then giving it to individuals with a market mentality for them to cut down the trees and put cattle pastures. And that was what development was thought to be by the development experts in the early 1980s. So, I mean, you know, there was clearly something that was amiss there. I mean, first of all, indigenous people exist. They had, even at that time, they had internationally recognized rights that weren't respected. And cutting down rainforests and putting cattle pastures on them is sort of bankrupt, even just ecologically. You have to cut down more forest every 2 or 3 years, and you just leave behind sterile pastures. So there was something. It's not that it was like the Achilles heel, but yes, it was really the point of view of indigenous Amazonian people about the Amazonian rainforest and how to use it, and the point of view of the development experts, that's all the agronomists, the foresters, the economists, the people at the World Bank, and people in Washington, people in Geneva, people with authority, people in universities who weren't anthropologists, had a completely different view. And by going to a place where there was one of these things going on, I could, a development project, plowing right into the territory of the Asháninka people, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the Peruvian Amazon. Go there, do anthropology, go and spend and that means you live 2 years with people, you ask them a lot of questions, and then you come back and you try to make sense of it.
Wow. And you say their name Asháninka. Asháninka. So the three framing questions, Jeremy, of the great relearning are these. Humans, who are we? Where have we been, we humans? And where might we be going? And and your book, The Cosmic Serpent, DNA and the Origins of Knowledge, takes the reader on this remarkable journey into the heart of the Asháninka territory. And can you talk about what you discovered, there when you were, correct me if I'm wrong, you were 25 years old when you parachuted into the Amazon?
I was about to turn 25. But actually, I could continue with what I was telling you, and it would also start to answer your question.
Please, yes.
It's that, so who are we humans? What I know is that as a almost 25-year-old showing up from the University Library of Stanford, coming to live with barefoot Amazonian Indians in their rainforest, about 10 miles from where the bulldozers were. I thought that, okay, so it's not that I was thinking much about what does it mean to be human, but I actually thought deep down that, I had more sophisticated knowledge. Not that I was more human. I had basic respect for them as humans, but I was pretty sure that my way of knowing about the world was more sophisticated than theirs. So what does it mean to be, to think about that question? Because the anthropological encounter, when you're an arrogant young white man and you stroll into the forest thinking that you have superior knowledge about things, you know about chemistry, you know about molecules, you know about the science, and these people are just Indians living in the rainforest. They don't even have shoes, and they paint their faces. And then they start saying things like, these plants and animals, they're people like us. They have personalities. They're intelligent. We communicate with them when we take hallucinogens. I'm saying, right. Okay. So I'm thinking what many anthropologists before me had thought. Well, these are animists. They're kind of superstitious. They still believe these sort of childish things that are irrational, and that actually, because they don't know better, they haven't had access to science. They're not bad people or anything, but they believe these kind of strange things. So what does it mean to be human? I found that, first of all, I had to come down from the pedestal of my own culture. And I think that as Westerners, we have considerable pedestal issues in terms of our whole cultures, our vocabularies. We thought we were so much better than other people. So I got like a crash course in humanity, one could say, because you come down after a few months living with these people, you realize that, first of all, you know nothing about how to live in the rainforest. And if they weren't there, you wouldn't have a chance. You see these people, they have huge knowledge about the plants and the animals and the ecosystem around them. And it's an incredibly diverse, rich, and dangerous ecosystem. I mean, these are really sharp people. And yes, they talk about plants as if they were people. But then, what do I know about plants? And, how can I be so sure that there's not a sort of a being inside the plant? I mean, I know that that's what I learned at high school, and that they told me that anybody who believed differently was cuckoo, and that it was like a cultural taboo to think that plants had mind back then. And, as I was saying, when I first got there, I didn't think plants had minds, and I didn't think either that you could take ayahuasca, which is a powerful hallucinogenic plant mixture, and in your visions learn about plant properties and real verifiable things, which is what they said. I mean, I was looking into what they knew about the rainforest. Not only did they know a lot, and this plant does this and that other plant does that, but when I check it out and see that it was true and ask them how they knew what they knew, they'd say, well, we have our shamans, ayahuasqueros, tabaqueros. They take their ayahuasca, their concentrated tobacco paste, and in their visions, they see the invisible beings that animate all living beings, that mean that we have kinship all together, and that these entities are intelligent, they're sources of knowledge. Nature speaks to people in their visions and in their dreams.
I just have to read the first couple of sentences of your book, if you'll indulge me, because
Sure.
as a reader and writer myself, chapter 1 of your book, Forest Television. This is you. The first time an Asháninka man told me that he had learned the medicinal properties of plants by drinking a hallucinogenic brew, I thought he was joking. We were in the forest, squatting next to a bush, whose leaves he claimed could cure the bite of a deadly snake. One learns these things by drinking ayahuasca, he said. But he was not smiling. I was like, I did not put the book down. I did not put the book down. Mm-hmm. It was such a remarkable journey. So
you're kind. You're kind, but I just add to that.
Yeah,
I think that there's like this important thing where you can unlearn some of your own prejudices, get to a sort of a level where you understand how there are other cultures, other points, other languages, other ways of looking at it, and then you situate yourself, and then you can get to sort of a broader level. The anthropological encounter where you think you're going to study people, and then you realize that they're also studying you. That yes. You, in their eyes, you seem actually probably a lot stranger than they do to your eyes. And so when you try to understand things, because you see, so they say he wasn't smiling. They say these things, and you realize that that's what they really think, and you realize that you don't believe it. But then you immediately, and this is where the mirror comes in, the other sends you this image of yourself, which is so you can't go on considering that statement without thinking, well, how am I so sure that can't be true? Well, then you have to start unpacking everything that your culture told you about that. And actually what my culture told me, that was impossible. The definition of psychosis is to think that there's verifiable information in your hallucinations. I mean, if you believe that, then you are nuts.
Yeah. So according to the Western mindset, let's say, to simplify, anybody who claims hallucinations actually impart wisdom is considered a lunatic.
Well, for a very long time, and probably in most cases up until today, I think that's true. But then you do have people like Aldous Huxley, for example, even though he actually didn't hallucinate in the doors of perception, but he opened the door as a philosopher a few inches and said, with mescaline, which is actually not the huge hallucinogen, but anyway, let's just say that one can have enhanced understanding of aesthetics and spiritual matters. That's what Huxley said. And then he had his critics. I don't think that most what could you call it? I'm not, because there's been a lot of change in the last 20 years with neuroscience, and so but still, I think that somebody who goes around saying, yes, I have visions, and in my visions, I saw this, that, and the other, and this should be considered valid knowledge. I think they'd be kicked out of a university in most places.
Yeah, some would call them psychonauts. They are experimenters with hallucinogens. Some would call them, as I think you do in the book, shamans, in the sense of mediating between the physical world and whatever we think of as the spiritual world. Can you talk about your own coming to a deeper understanding of this through your ayahuasca journeys initially, when you landed there in the Amazon with the Asháninka, and you chose, and I'm curious, you chose to open yourself up to their experiences. Can you talk about how and why you made that decision?
Well, yeah, for sure. So the method of anthropology that they teach you is called participant observation, and it means that you go, you live with people, you participate, and you observe. And it's been pointed out that it's kind of a schizophrenic method because, at the same time that you're pretending to play the game, you're also like commenting on it. So, it's as if you played a sport and you're on the field playing, and at the same time you're commenting the game, so it's a little bit, I actually did that quite a bit with my kids, but that's another matter. I actually liked being the player, commentator, referee, the whole caboodle. But anyway, so there you are at Stanford. You read Levi-Strauss on participant observation, or Malinowski, or whoever, and yes, and so this is the method. So you read it in books. They don't actually teach you participant observation, but once you've read like 20 books on fieldwork or whatever, they put you in an airplane and they throw you into the jungle, and then you figure it out. So how do you participate and observe? Well, it's kind of you're left open to your own interpretation of how to do that. At least that's how it was 40 years ago. So and before feeling that I was an anthropologist, I'd actually gone from Canada to Switzerland, from Switzerland to England, from England to California, and there I was in Peru. I had the experience of like parachuting into a new place where you're kind of lost. So before being an anthropologist among Asháninka, I was like a lost fellow among whoever, these people here. So, all right, but wait, I'm an anthropologist. I've got to do participant observation. Right. So what does that mean? Well, by my books, it means you don't take notes in front of people. You don't whip out the camera unless they ask you to. You eat what they eat, and you tell them that you'd be happy to help them with their work. There was actually this Italian sociologist called Danilo Dolci who wrote about his way of doing field work among Sicilian peasants was to at least work 3 weeks with them, cutting the hay and stuff until you have blisters. And then if you have a rapport with you say, could you tell me your life story? Could I record it? I'd be interested in hearing it. And, and then they can confide it to you. You actually do have a relationship. And then they can, they feel that you suffered together. So the idea is to go hang out. It's not supposed to be easy. I took it like, a young doctor's got to go to a hospital and work and do, to become a doctor. So to become an anthropologist, you got to go to an out of the way place, be lost, ask a lot of stupid questions, be bored, not know what's going on, and for months, and eat what's available. Participant observation. And so then when you say, how do you know what you know? I mean, that was the main question I was asking. Yeah. Well, the way we know, Brother Jeremy, we've got this extract, ayahuasca. It's the television of the forest. You drink it, you see images, and you learn things. And if you like, we can show you. Well, some would say that to remain an objective, but actually at Stanford, they'd already taught me that nobody's objective. You can't study other humans objectively. You can't leap out of your head and mind and culture and get to a place of objective standards and look at other people. That's impossible. What you can do is situate yourself subjectively, see what you've seen and heard about other people, and then people who read what you write can triangulate. That's the idea. So you assume the subjective stance. And so, yeah, what better way of understanding what they think about how they know than drinking the brew that they say gives them knowledge. So for me, it was pretty obvious that I was going to drink.
Yeah.
And then, people would say, well, so you took a risk. It's a hallucinogenic. It could have been dangerous. And yes, I think taking hallucinogens is risky in all cases. You don't know how borderline you are until you've actually swallowed the brew, but then it's too late. But then doing field work is a risk. Living is a risk. Confronting your worldview to other people's, like these Asháninka people, that was a risk. And the overall experience I came out of, so I'll tell you about the first ayahuasca experience, which I think was your question.
Please, yeah.
The problem was that it was mind-blowing and it confirmed what these people said. I'll explain. I do describe it in the first chapter of The Cosmic Serpent, but I have no problem returning to it.
Please. After
drinking this bitter brew, I found myself surrounded by enormous fluorescent serpents of light intensity, like, I don't know, 10, 100 times more intense than ordinary reality. These serpents started talking to me in a telepathic language that went through my forehead. And the first thing they said was, "You're just a tiny human being." And I could see, looking at them, that they were right. And I could see all the arrogance of my materialist, rationalist, humanist worldview that presupposed that what my eyes were showing me didn't exist. I didn't think this kind of thing was that it would happen. But so the extremely coherent, hallucinatory, fluorescent intelligences telling me things about myself. My worldview collapsed in front of me. I had to get up to vomit. This is like 10 minutes in. In Asháninka, the word for ayahuasca is kamarampi, from the verb to vomit. So like stepping over these serpents, excuse me. And then I was a materialist agnostic. I started vomiting colors. I saw levitating Asháninka women in the dark. I could see in the dark. I had entities behind me telling me to rinse my mouth out, but not to swallow. The stuff that I'd actually vomited was light. It was like fluorescent red light, fluorescent green light. And then when I was done, I went back to where the shaman was singing his Icaro melodies and sat back down. And on the wings of these melodies, I blasted out of my body, but in my visions, miles above the planet was all white and covered in ice. I read about the snowball Earth hypothesis 8 years later when it was formulated. I'd never heard of that the Earth had once been completely covered in ice. It turns out that it seems like 750 million years ago it was, but I thought with magma, volcanoes, hot dinosaurs, and here we are, no ice, but there it was. And then the shaman shifted his melody, and boom, I came back down into my body, almost protesting. Like I didn't actually enjoy being out of my body way up there, but the return was so quick that then I was saying, he can't change his melody and bring me back down here. But then it just went on, and the images were like, I'm almost over, but I mean, it's a problem when you ask people about their ayahuasca experiences. But I saw, for example, the leaves, the veins of a green leaf and the veins of a human hand, and then they were superposing it. And the message was, it's the same stuff, the same stuff. And then hundreds of thousands of other images. It was like being in a washing machine for 3 hours. And then when it was over, I don't know, it kind of came back. I slept well. I had beautiful dreams of flying. And the next morning, I went down to the river to freshen up. I was feeling great. And I took the green leaf of a bush and held it up to the sun. And it was true that the veins were similar, and they even felt the same. And I had this understanding at that point that, okay, I'm a tiny human being, but I'm part of this whole green, shiny, blue biosphere, a little slice of which I can see right here this morning. I'm like a plant, but I can walk. Hey, not bad. Tiny human being, but a human being nonetheless. It was the first time in my life that I felt reconciled with nature. The first time in 25 years that I actually felt part of nature. The overall, so they said you can see images and learn things. The whole thing for me was like an antidote to the anthropocentrism of anthropology. You know, anthropology, the study of human beings. The human being who studies the human being is an anthropologist. And so, you know, you're as an anthropologist in those days, you were in a world of humans, and the first thing this mixture did to me was kick me in the pants and make me see that there was more to the landscape than just humans. Yeah. And you know, that actual, I've never been able to unsee that, and it changed my way of looking at the world, looking at anthropology. I did write a dissertation that followed the cultural anthropological standards and talked about humans. It hardly mentioned ayahuasca. I did get the PhD. But then the anthropology, I decided to get out of the universities and then to try to do something. So I began working for a Swiss NGO right after that and raising funds for Amazonian people so that they can get land rights. And one of the ways of raising funds was to give talks about why Amazonian people know things about the rainforest. It means that if we entrust the rainforest to them, that it'll be well looked after. So my work also involved doing basic anthropology, making Amazonian people understandable to Europeans with an ecological sensitivity. You want to save the rainforest? Work with the indigenous people. They may be barefoot. They may not speak your language. They may not be too good at accounting, but they're serious people. They have real knowledge about the forest, and they are its best guardians. And it doesn't cost that much to demarcate their territories. That was the argument. Here, the anthropologist is acting simply as a translator, a cultural translator. Yeah. You know, making Amazonians understandable to Europeans or North Americans. I salute my friends at the Marian Foundation, because starting in 1999, the Marian Foundation actually backed this work. And then making Europeans and North Americans understandable to Amazonians. You know, I'd say, look, these gringos, they're generous people, but, you know, they want precise accounts. So we precise accounts here. Yeah. You know, they're a little bit obsessed with numbers, those gringos. But
and speaking of numbers, 12 million acres.
Actually, now that it's we got to 6 million hectares times 2.4, I think. So you do the math there, but maybe closer to 15 at this point.
And the name of your organization you work with?
Nouvelle Planète. New Planet.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that our listeners, our viewers, were aware that in addition to this anthropological work that you've been doing, you've been a part of remarkable effort to, as we say in the historical field, you've been a cultural broker. You've been able to, there's that Western language again, you've been able to help these different cultures deepen their understandings of one another. So
Well,
thank you.
you know,
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you for your kind words. I will say, though, that one thing that really struck me while living with the Asháninka. So I went to Asháninka finishing school. And so one of the things that they got across
Yes.
was
Yeah.
practice is the most advanced form of theory.
Yeah.
In fact, they use, when they say, eso es teoría, they don't have a word for theory in Asháninka, but they understand the Spanish word. And actually, it's what they mean by bullshit.
Yes.
That if an idea is good, you can use it. So the guy who comes to town with a lot of theory, where the most advanced form of theory is when you can actually apply it. So that's why I thought that doing applied anthropology back in my day, it was like, if you were smart, you could teach at a university, and if not, you did applied anthropology, and that was for those who were less smart, something like that. I chose to go for the applied and never look back, but because I actually thought it was more advanced. I thought that I'd get a better understanding of Amazonian people and reality by working with them instead of studying them. So in other words, I'll raise funds for them. I'll look at their initiatives and give them my feedback. If I think they're going in the right direction, I'll look for funding. I'll keep an eye on how they spend it. I'll overview, I'll back their initiatives. I was almost like taking my orders from them. They did say after 4 years of me raising funds to demarcate territories, like in 1993, they said the people running the indigenous organizations in the Peruvian Amazon, they said, what we need now is after the recognition of our territories is the recognition of our systems of knowledge. And we want to set up bilingual intercultural education programs for our children so that they can learn in our language and in our system of knowledge, as well as in science and in Spanish. Because right now they're getting a monocultural Spanish education that's turning them into idiots. In 1993, I said, look, I've been doing pretty well raising funds for the demarcation of indigenous territories and land rights. That was already pretty esoteric at that point. It seemed like this was going to be a tall order to get people here interested in giving money to the bilingual intercultural education of indigenous Amazonians. But after 2 years, I actually did find a foundation, and we did, 25 years backing of this program. Thanks to that, I'm pleased to say. But yeah, it was the indigenous people who said, we need land rights, we need bilingual intercultural education. They don't need fish, they don't need lessons in how to grow trees or go hunting. They need that their territories be recognized and not invaded, and they need their kids to have knowledge. So yeah, I took my orders from them, collaborated with them, and occasionally wrote books on the way where I tried to, talking to the non-Amazonian world, communicate how I think they see things. Not because I've been studying them like an anthropologist for the last 30 years, but more like I listen to indigenous people, I interview them, I read what other anthropologists have written, but first and foremost, I would position myself as somebody who has been working with them. And I really make a difference between like collaborating with and studying,
I was just thinking that you move from an anthropologist who is an observer to a collaborative participant. And that's what's so striking, I think, about your work and your writing. I'm going to hold up the book cover and ask you to tell our listeners and viewers what is going on here. We have, I assume it's the cosmic serpent on the left, and what looks to be the DNA helix on the right. Can you talk a little bit about your hypothesizing, your theorizing, which
Yep.
I love the theory versus practice, Asháninka wisdom there. That I highlighted that in the book, and it's like, yes,
Mm-hmm.
that is important. But talk about what's going on here visually.
Okay. Well, after it was after doing 4 years of intensive fundraising, suddenly a bug got into me, like a bell rings, and it was, there is a subject. It's a precise subject. It's in 1992, there'd been the Earth Summit. Everybody was talking about the knowledge of indigenous people, especially Amazonian people, about plants, about biodiversity, about sustainable development.
Yes.
They signed treaties recognizing this. Suddenly, it was like these were things you never heard in the 1980s. And in
Sting was singing.
Sting, Brownie,
all the people. Yeah.
So everybody was talking about indigenous knowledge. Nobody was talking about how Amazonian people, for example, talk about their knowledge and where they say some of it comes from. Nobody was saying that Amazonian people consider that part of their knowledge comes from the hallucinations of their shamans. So what does this mean? It was obvious to me why no one in the academy had treated this seriously before, because if you treated that subject seriously, it meant you were kind of crazy. If you really took seriously that you could get information. So in other words, it had to mean something else, but what it meant was mysterious, and it's kind of normal. I mean, Indians say these mysterious things, and who knows?
Yeah.
And, we're cultural relativists. So, and we're not going to position ourselves. We're not going to say we don't believe it, and we're not going to say we do believe it. We're just going to say that that's what they say and then leave it at that. Because there's a kind of a sign that says, if you go beyond this, you are entering the territory of the irrational. So as an anthropologist, you got to turn around.
Right, which strikes me, by the way, as a complete abdication of your responsibility for the journey. But anyway, yeah,
well,
it's such an important point, right?
Anthropologists have been called the missionaries of rationalism, and perhaps with reason.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought that, so I knew why nobody had talked about it, because I myself hadn't talked about it. It was just too far off the map. In fact, I hadn't talked about it in my dissertation. I hadn't talked about it in my fundraising. When I raised funds, I said, these people know how to use the forest rationally. That means productively without cutting it down. Everybody else cuts it down and kills it. These people live within it, and they cut little bits down, and then it grows back, and they have lots of diversity in their gardens, and their gardens mimic the forest. And in brief, they use it productively, and they don't destroy it. That's why they are the most rational users of the forest. I argued, not talking about the irrational origin of part of their knowledge. So, I'd avoided the subject myself. Almost all anthropologists until then had avoided the subject. So I decided to launch an investigation into that one question. What could it possibly mean when these people who have some of the most advanced knowledge about biodiversity on Earth, I mean, the Peruvian Amazon is really the epicenter of world biodiversity. There's more species of everything in that forest than anywhere else, and these people have names in their language for just about every species. So so there was something that was taking their knowledge seriously, in my view, implied not just knowing which plants they recognize, but taking seriously what they say themselves about how they get this knowledge. So I started looking into that. I read all the literature, and all the anthropologists who'd been like me to places like in the Peruvian Amazon with indigenous people said the same thing. They all say, even though there's like 56 different indigenous cultures in the Peruvian Amazon alone, not even talking about Brazil or anywhere else, they say we have these plants, ayahuasca, tobacco, we have these specialists, they take these plants, and in their visions, they see these invisible entities that are common to all life forms, that mean that we are all one big family. They're invisible. They are at the root of life. They're nearby, but most of the time we can't see them. They're sources of information. And then we have represented them in like our myths and our stories and images. These entities are often associated with the axis mundi, is a form that historians of religion call. You see in these shamanic images around the world, but in particular in the Amazon, the ladder, the twisting ladder, the two vines, the two serpents wrapped around each other, and this serpentine form, and then all the cosmic serpents in the myths in the Amazon. It's chock filled with origin myths, stories of life began with a serpent-shaped entity arriving and twins getting out of this entity and creating life through transformation. Okay, so they all have this. This is like constant. So there's like this overlap between shamanic practices and concepts that are practiced now, and then the mythological sphere. And they themselves say that when you take ayahuasca, you go into the mythological sphere and get in touch with this primordial stuff. And it's also more complicated. I mean, there are jaguars and all kinds of transformation. But okay, so there I was in my office in Switzerland thinking about this. Okay, so they're saying that there are invisible entities that are at the basis of our kinship with all living beings, that they're sources of information. So either they're wrong, but I'm going to suspend disbelief and consider that they're right. So if that what they're saying actually corresponds to something real. So either science hasn't caught up with them, or science has caught up with them but calls it something different from a different perspective. So what could that be? What could correspond to invisible entities that are the basis of kinship, that are sources of information? Well, the DNA molecule, obviously. But then the DNA molecule was discovered with an electron microscope, at least its shape and function, in 1953 in England. How could these barefoot Indians know anything about DNA? That's impossible. I mean, they don't have electron microscopes. But I'm suspending disbelief. So and besides, what do I know about DNA? Yeah. Besides that it's a double helix, that it's common to all life forms, and that it is itself a text full of information, the chemical text. Well, lo and behold, looking at its shape, really taking seriously the idea that if you look at what shamans say about these entities, and then you look at what science says about DNA, the overlap and the number of correspondences is crazy. So that, yes, this double serpent shape, this twisted ladder shape, allows the molecule to be an information storage and duplication device. Its shape explains its function. It's not just, that's its shape and it means nothing. No, its shape is actually central to its functionality. That double snake shape is, and that's what molecular biology demonstrated, is at the heart of life's duplication. That's how one cell becomes two. The molecule unzips itself, and because these are complementary strands, it can have exact copies of itself made. Voila, one 4 billion word text becomes two identical 4 billion word texts. That's just talking about a human cell. And that if you look at what indigenous people say, and then so you have this shape, the serpent shape is even in Western pharmacies and the Caduceus, and you find the intuition that serpent, life, health go together. Well, some will say, oh yes, because serpents have venom. But and so therefore the pharmacy, the venom. But actually, many of the mythological snakes, like anacondas, pythons, boas, they don't have venom. So it's not the venomous snakes that are object of, adoration, or no. It is that there is this human intuition that snake form is essential to life. That's how it's been talked about for thousands of years. And now molecular biologists with their DNA they found the physical manifestation of this. Um, just what does it mean exactly? Before saying, okay, and so this therefore must be interpreted as signifying that, ayahuasca is an electron microscope. No, it's probably more complex than that, but it is true that when you drink this jungle liana, the liana itself is serpent shaped. When you drink it, even people who have not been primed with the notion will tend to see snakes. It's by far the most common. I myself hallucinated snakes, as I was just telling you. Yes. And I don't even really like snakes. I don't want to hallucinate snakes. It's not something that you, carry around. And anyway, so that is the idea is that in animist cultures that have correctly identified the unity under the surface of diversity, they're saying, so we see different species, but actually we're the same family, even though we don't look alike. That there's people like me inside that plant. There's someone home. There's someone home everywhere. We're built the same. We don't look the same, but under the surface there is this unity, and we're animated by the same form, intelligence, entities, and science has proved it. That point of view, I don't think that once you understand that, you take, my body, my parents, their grandparents, you can go back 4 billion years to a bacterium. That all of life on Earth, and concretely the DNA molecules in my cells are copies of DNA molecules that go all the way. Of course, they've evolved, but when the bacterium moves on and becomes a pluricellular, and then you finally get animals, and then the animals evolve, and then you get humans, and then finally you get us in 2023 sitting here. Our cells, our DNA, all this came from this long line, and it really is true. I don't think there's any contestation that every plant, every rose bush, every leaf, and every animal and ourselves were all related for real in physico-chemical terms.
Yeah, I was struck when I finished your book, Jeremy. I'm fond of Rumi's beautiful observation. Each of us is not a drop in the ocean. Each of us is the ocean in a drop. And I found myself kind of scratching this down. Each of us is not a leaf in the forest. Back to your ayahuasca overlay between the leaf and the human hand. Each of us is not a leaf in the forest. Each of us is the forest in a leaf. And I don't know if that works or not, but this idea of marrying plant medicine and the wisdom that it seems to reveal with molecular biology and its latest discoveries is just it. I don't really know what does it mean, as you just asked. It's amazing. Yeah,
I think that one of the science is wonderful, and science can allow us to get to solid, verifiable knowledge. I mean, just the knowing that DNA actually does exist, that it is a molecule. So it's matter. It's not electromagnetic waves. It may deal with electromagnetic waves, but there's actually something there. It actually couldn't be smaller. It's like 10 atoms large. If it were less large, it couldn't duplicate. So it's like at the limits of material existence, but it's still material. And the scientists found it in 1953, and that's not nothing. The problem is that scientists will often say we're not involved with why, we're involved with how. In the case of DNA, this is complicated because what it turns out, if you actually take what they say about the molecule seriously, it's not just a molecule. It's not just deoxyribonucleic acid. It's a chemical text. When you run into a DNA molecule, it actually is. It's not a 26-letter text. It's a 4-letter text, and it specifies amino acids or not. It has its own, and it's the same code for all living beings. So it's all one DNA language. So saying that it's just a molecule is like saying that a text by Shakespeare is just ink on paper. Yes, it is ink on paper or maybe light on a screen. But who cares? It's what it says. So here we have something that is both a substance and a text and a duplication device, information storage duplication device. It seems to move, it seems to wind and unwind, it seems to allow itself to be read and transcribed to produce proteins that it needs to do this, that, and the other. It actually seems to be more than just a molecule that's kind of there and that has information in it. But the interpreting what is DNA, I think this is a question that kind of remains to be talked about in the decades to come. It's wonderful that it's been discovered. Yes, it is a molecule. Yes, it does something that it's said. But so then what really is it? It is not just a molecule. And so what is this kind of living linguistic stuff of life that is kind of almost like it does seem to have like a mind of its own. But talking about the mind of DNA, this is already slightly beyond the frontier, I think, of acceptable molecular molecular biologists, they want to get on with the hardware and the proteomics and the more molecules. They don't want to get into the metaphysics, but it means that there's a whole area. So what does this mean? Your question. I mean, clearly more research is needed on what this means, if ever there was research needed. But one thing that it clearly means is that, yes, if there's one thing that we know is that we have real live kinship with every living being on this planet, that they are members of our family, we're members of their family. We're all in this together. The idea that humans are on a pedestal is incorrect. I mean, a lot of people want to stay up on that pedestal, but they're starting to look stupid.
What do you call it? Pedestal complex? Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Oh my gosh. And I want to be respectful of our time. I feel like we could continue this conversation, and I hope we will. Maybe one last question for you, Jeremy. We've been talking here at the Great Relearning with humans like Jeremy Lent and bearing most recently Mark Booth, the author of The Secret History of the World. And same question to you. What wisdom, or maybe even not wisdom, what suggestions can you give for our listeners and viewers based on your remarkable work and writing and experiences? What suggestions can you impart to us as we, I think, struggle here in the early 21st century with trying to make sense of it all and how best to flow forward?
Yeah. I think it's difficult because what I think is really good is not necessarily a recipe for 8 billion people. So there's got to be many different answers to that question. But for me, knowledge is really the name of the game, and knowledge for people. In other words, at this point, humans are making a lot of decisions for what goes on in this world. Mm-hmm. And so the humans need knowledge of the world and understand, well, for example, our kinship with other species. You can't just throw pesticide on plants and then expect that that's not going to come and affect you. We're part of the tissue, for goodness sake. We got to understand where, so we need to tell stories, write books, make it attractive, make knowledge entertaining and interesting. The world is incredibly interesting. If only we could see what's really going on inside of a blade of grass, it could be a Hollywood spectacle. It's just, or even in a human body, if we could really understand what goes on, the sperm, the ovum, how a being unfolds and turns into, all of life. I think that if one could, but then we ourselves have to understand it. It's not as if, we have all the knowledge and all we have to do is pour it down people's gullets. No, is that instead of putting an emphasis on owning objects, you put an emphasis on owning knowledge and being interested in the world and getting to a better understanding of other cultures, other points of view, other species, plants, animals, and even if it's just a dog, even if it's just a pine tree, cultivating an interest of really trying to understand, that pine tree, why does it smell like that? What's inside that? Getting a richer understanding of the things around us, where our food comes from, what is medicine for us. I mean, whatever, what happens when you fall in love in your heart? What are the hormones that rush into your brain when you fall in love? I don't know, there's just so many experiences that we find interesting: eating, sex, swimming, and getting a deeper, I think that, somebody's already said this, but knowledge deepens pleasure.
Yes.
So the more you know, the more knowledge you have, and pass it on. Knowing about the world is where it's at. And if we move forward and there's less and less people knowing anything, it's not going to end well. So it's really about knowing and figuring out how to get people interested in the complexity of the world around us.
Wow, beautifully said. Well, Jeremy Narby, this has been such a remarkable conversation. Maybe we can end with the very last sentence in your book, if that's all right.
Very good.
You write, to conclude, the cosmic serpent, DNA, and the origins of knowledge. You write this: all things considered, wisdom requires not only the investigation of many things, but contemplation of the mystery. I almost, I won't say. What a beautiful way to end the book.
Because finally, the more you know, the more you realize that there's still more stuff to know, and that's okay. That actually, I will not even understand 1% of the cosmos when I die. It's impossible, or 0.1%, but that's okay. So you get 80 years on the planet. You do your most to sort of figure out who we are, what we're doing here, and then adios, and you pass it on.
Yes. If our listeners, viewers want to support you and your work, Jeremy, where do we go?
I think the Marian Foundation is a great place to. Your viewers are sort of linked in. Marian has done a lot of good things, and I'm sure will continue to do. So just go for it.
Sounds great. Well, Jeremy Narby, thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your wisdom with us. I hope that you and I may meet face to face.
Yes, that would be a pleasure, Rob. Thank you for your good questions.
Yes, indeed. And we'll talk again soon.
All right, with pleasure.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Ciao. Woo. Welcome to the Great Relearning. We are back with the three Baldwin brothers, Ian and Michael and Philip, to debrief Jeremy Narby's The Cosmic Serpent, DNA and the Origins of Knowledge. Gentlemen, welcome. It's always good to have you in the Great Relearning Room.
Good.
So please, Philip.
Well, first of all, I thought Jeremy's talk was brilliant, it was fabulously grounded, and I found it emotionally quite moving at times. But there was one little phrase that seemed to stick out for me and captured everything, and he referred to the unity flowing under the surface of diversity. And I thought it was a very beautiful phrase in reference to the intelligence and manner of learning that indigenous people have through ayahuasca as an agent. And that's just a beautiful way to start and captures so much of what Jeremy is about, I think.
Philip, could you just repeat that phrase again? I want to make sure I got it. I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
The unity which flows under the surface of diversity.
Thank you.
So when you take ayahuasca, apparently, it's not something I've actually done, you go under all of the chaos and diverse realities of everyday life, and you flow into something else. And that something else, of course, is the unity that is found in DNA, and it is found in life and the interconnectedness of everything on this planet, from an amoeba to my clunky old brain.
He used the example of the ayahuasquero who said, look at your hand,
Yeah.
look at the leaf. And then he,
Same.
later on, I don't think he did it right away, but he might have, doesn't matter. He looked at a leaf. He looked
Yeah.
at the hand.
Yeah.
And the complex webbing of both struck him. I guess the question I have is, we're very good at digging diversity, meaning the complexity of the world, digging down and say, oh, it was much more complicated than you thought. But the idea that a unity sets it up and pervades it is essentially, in my view, a spiritual idea, and the one that we've lost. And anyway, I don't want to get too far ahead of us here, but it did strike me, and
yeah,
I think it's worth holding in mind.
Definitely, and I think that kind of flows through the whole talk with Jeremy. What you just said, it's a kind of underlying river in the conversation, and you know, he brings to his subject a sort of I would almost say compassionate understanding about another way of learning without discrediting our way of learning. He doesn't trash science. He does point out that science comes to the knowledge thousands and thousands of years after perhaps the Aboriginals did. So there's this issue of, well, the cart and the horse, and what can we accept as true and what can we accept as theory? And there's all of that conversation, which applies to a great, great deal of pretty much everything we look at in this series of interviews we're doing. But I felt that Jeremy spoke with enormous equanimity, and he was just sanguine in the way he addressed his subject and the way he talked about applied anthropology, essentially. Right. Participatory anthropology, and very vivid, very clear, very logical.
Yes, and the way in which he took sort of the traditional way of studying an indigenous community or culture, and deciding for once or finally to really get stuck in. In other words, to work with them, to eat with them, to ingest their food, and then, of course, to take the final step and use the source of so much information that they have. You know, for me, he's one of the most genuine people I've ever come across.
I agree. He has a quality that's quite rare. I'm not sure I can verbalize it. It's not just humility, but it's a very special quality.
Yeah. And of course, we all, the thing that struck me too, because I've just been sort of recently reading how we've lost almost 25% of the Amazon. And we are getting very close to, which you probably all know, the tipping point, whereby if you destroy too much more, you have no outcome except a total destruction of the Amazon, because the trees, you have to retain a certain amount of vegetation to interact with the ocean to give you the kind of rainfall that supports such a huge area. And of course, these savages, these indigenous peoples, they know so beautifully how to live so incredibly intelligently, sustainably, knowledgeably within that biome. But God, they're savages, they're idiots, they have no idea that, of course, we have to take down the Amazon. And even though it can only sustain growing for one season, we'll just keep moving on and doing more. Anyway.
It's called the lungs of the planet. So it's not a local disaster. It's a planetary disaster.
Right.
Yeah. I was reminded, talking with Jeremy, of another beautiful book more recently, which you're all familiar with, which is Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass. And the subtitle of that book goes something like Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. Mm-hmm. And as I was talking with Jeremy, I was reminded of, I think he calls for what Dr. Kimmerer calls for, which is to run in parallel indigenous wisdom with scientific knowledge in a both and sort of relationship rather than an either or relationship. And the way that Narby relays his experiences as a young anthropologist in the Amazon, kind of pivoting from, Western ways of knowing to the television of the forest, as he calls it.
I love that.
The plant medicine in chapter 1. You're like, what is going on? It's really remarkable. Really remarkable.
Yeah.
The use of the word knowledge, of course, he ends with you discussing knowledge. He says something like, knowledge is the game we're in. It's what it's all about. And of course, stepping back, I think I know what he was saying. To me, as a Westerner, trained in my generation and all the way I've been, we have all been, knowledge is still, when you use that word, I don't think spiritually, I think factually and scientifically.
Yeah.
And that's included, I think, in what Jeremy means by knowledge. He talks about we need knowledge of the world and its complexity. And the complexity is so fantastic that there is no way, in my opinion, I don't know whether it's his opinion, but I have a feeling it would be, that we're going to model it, manipulate it, and control it. It's more a knowledge that gives us this space to be in it in a way that's wise, for lack of a better word.
I think that's exactly what he means, Ian. What you just said was very well put at the end. I think, to me, that's exactly what he meant. Knowledge in order to be wise within it.
And isn't it also to accept, I mean, it seemed to me at the end, with doing the DNA and the extraordinary knowledge that they've had for thousands of years about the double helix and stuff, isn't it also to reside in the sort of the mystery of the extraordinary perfection?
Bingo. That mystery is the spirituality.
Yeah.
That's our challenge, the four of us and all our fellows, on, as Rob likes to call it, Team Human. To have that mystery come back in.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it, Ian. Inviting back in the mystery.
Yeah.
And
I'm coping with it because I'm living in the effing world of the moment, as we all are. And I used to have tremendous experiences of the mystery, especially as a much younger man. I have them less. But I'm hoping to change that.
well,
Hurry up.
It's hard. It's
Hurry
hard
up.
because of the. I'm reaching for my iPhone. There's 20 paces behind me because that's so much.
Yeah.
Today.
Well, maybe that's a last question for us to ponder, and maybe leave our listeners and viewers pondering: is how do we, in this 21st century world we live in, how do we go about inviting back in the mystery? Like, it seems to me that's a really powerful question, right? How do we invite
that?
Yeah,
That's a big piece of why we're having these interviews.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't think we need to go deep.
A lot of
yeah, please. I was going to say, I don't think we need to go deep into the Amazon. I think the mystery is right here.
Right.
You all, I'm sure, are familiar with the story, which says that, you can travel all over the world and learn nothing. And you can stay right at home and learn everything.
Yeah. Yeah. But you got to sort of let go, and you got to sort of invite quietly. You can't push this. You have to just sort of allow yourself to open.
Yep.
Well,
Very
gentlemen.
much so. Very much so. And since the times we live in, the zeitgeist is, we know better. So you do this. It's for your good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. That's good.
Well, maybe that's a good resting place. I was struck by how long ago Jeremy wrote this book, The Cosmic Serpent. And I've heard luminaries, most recently, I think I sent this to you all, Jordan B. Peterson on his international best-selling book tour, on many occasions with his book 12 Rules for Life, referencing The Cosmic Serpent as like on his short list of books to read if you really want to understand kind of the existential nature of the human condition. And so I hope that our conversation and our conversation with Jeremy will perhaps ignite or reignite some interest in The Cosmic Serpent. I think it's a very important book.
We should mention that he has written other books. The Intelligence of Nature is one. And I don't know what the others are, Michael.
Well, he's done one on hallucinogens.
Oh,
really?
Does he include tobacco in that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So check out the Jeremy Narby canon.
Yeah. Very good.
All right. Well, thanks, gentlemen.
Okay.
Until next time, you've been listening to and watching The Great Relearning. We are in the Great Relearning Room. Special thanks to Ian and Michael and Philip Baldwin, and we will see you next time.